Hey guys, it's Tom from Clean Pro Supply. Today we're going to be diving into the property restoration industry. This is the first in our series of videos meant to be an introduction to the property restoration industry, designed more towards new people who maybe are curious about the industry or looking to get into it, newer people who've recently gotten into the industry, or even experienced people who may be struggling a little bit or who just want to learn something. So let's dig right into it. What is the property restoration industry? So it's an industry that deals with repairing properties after damage caused by things like fire, water, mold, or storms, and the related work that sometimes can include things like abatement and biohazard cleanup. Now, companies working in this field often work closely with insurance companies, and ideally the insurance company is oftentimes footing the bill. And the goal is typically to restore the property to pre-loss condition. So, a general contractor would typically go in and, you want to remodel a kitchen and make it all look brand new. We're typically going in and we're just trying to get it back to the way it was before the loss happened. So, as far as losses go, what can those entail? It could be water damage, things like sump pump failures, flooded basements, sewage backups, pipe bursts, bathtub overflows, refrigerator supply line leaks, leaky roofs, or it can be something as severe as major flooding caused by a hurricane or maybe a river flooding its banks. It can also include fire damage, which can be something very extreme that destroys an entire building down to the foundation, or it could be a very small fire. Maybe somebody burned something while cooking and the whole house is just filled with smoke odor and maybe black soot that needs to be cleaned up. It often includes mold remediation. Mold naturally occurs when you have water damage. It includes storm damage, which can be maybe a roof ripped off by high winds or a tree knocked down by a storm and the tree limbs go through the house. Really common sources of loss. It can include biohazard things like the cleanup of blood and feces and cleaning up after someone in an area maybe had a communicable disease. This was very big during COVID. It can even include things like trauma cleaning, cleaning up after someone passed away in an area, or it can include hoarder cleanouts. So there are many, many different types of job that fall under the restoration umbrella. Now, restoration can typically be broken into three different sections. You've got your mitigation. Mitigation deals mostly with sort of minimizing the damage and cleaning up the immediate damage. And by that I mean, for instance, with like a flooded basement, it would be extracting water and drying the place out to make sure that no additional damage occurs. And sometimes it means removing damaged materials to either because they're so damaged that they can't be dried properly, or removing materials to allow other materials to dry. For instance, if you have several layers of drywall and you can't get it all dry because it's just too many layers, sometimes you have to remove a little bit of the material. So it can also include remediation, which typically that involves things like removing asbestos and lead, mold, things like that. That comes into play oftentimes when you're trying to do your mitigation. You have damaged materials or materials that need to be removed, but there's some other hazard there that needs to be addressed. And then last, there's reconstruction. Reconstruction is just putting stuff back together. Oftentimes reconstruction involves, the sort of work that a general contractor might do, patching drywall that was removed as a result of some flooding perhaps, then repainting the room, putting back flooring that had been removed due to maybe like warping caused by swelling of hardwood floors that got wet. Now, not every company does all of these things. Not everybody does mitigation and remediation and reconstruction. Some companies just focus on one of those things. It's a lot easier to be really good at one thing than to be great at everything. So there, you don't have to do all three to get into restoration. Mitigation tends to be the more profitable route, and part of that is because in mitigation, a lot of the profit that you make comes from renting out equipment, especially drying equipment. Your air movers, your commercial fans, your dehumidifiers, your HEPA air filters, things like that. And we like to sort of say in the industry that The dehumidifier is the employee that never sleeps, never takes a break, never complains, never takes a day off, just works and generates constant profit. So mitigation, the profits can be high because a lot of the money just comes from renting out equipment. The reconstruction side, the margins aren't as great, but you're often dealing with larger dollar amounts because you're, sometimes doing significant reconstruction. Sometimes you're rebuilding an entire house after a fire or something like that, which, there's a lot of money involved. Many insurance companies these days, and many customers as well, really like the sort of like one-stop shop approach. One company that can do everything from the mitigation into the reconstruction. So they only have to deal with one company throughout the entire process. Homeowners appreciate it, but if you're only doing one phase of this, maybe just mitigation, for instance, it's often an opportunity for you to set up other contractors. Maybe you know a good reconstruction guy, and you can connect the homeowner with that and maybe get a referral fee out of it. There are some pros, some really noticeable pros to working in the industry. The big pros, job stability. Things are always going to flood. Fires are always going to happen. Mold's always going to grow. Doesn't matter what's happening with the economy. Doesn't matter what's happening with politics. It's very reliable. This stuff is just going to happen. The margins tend to be very good, like I mentioned before, because a lot of what we're doing is renting out equipment. And the other great thing is that it's often paid for by insurance, which means that, if you were to do just general repairs to homes, you would be completely dependent upon, does the homeowner have the money available to pay for this work? Well, when it comes to the restoration industry, oftentimes insurance is paying the bill, and typically people have insurance to prepare for these sudden large expenses. It's also a con, the insurance company paying for things, because working with insurance companies can be complicated. There's a lot of documentation sometimes required to get the money that you are owed for the work you've performed. And it can take a long time to get paid from insurance-related work, whereas perhaps like a general contracting business, if it takes 30 days for the customer to pay you, that's a long time. Where in the restoration industry, 30 days isn't that bad. You have to plan more for like a 90-day kind of receivable cycle. So you need to have a little bit more cash in your pocket to be able to pay your staff and to keep your company afloat until you sort of gain traction and momentum and start having steady jobs and steady income. It can be physically demanding. It is very much a 24/7 industry. If someone's house floods at 2 o'clock in the morning, they want you out there at 2 in the morning. If you try to tell them, hey man, I'll be out there during normal business hours, they're probably going to call somebody else and you're going to lose that job to your competition. And speaking of that, it is a very competitive industry. Because there's no specific licensing requirements to be a restoration contractor, aside from whatever your state requires as far as, just being a contractor or a business owner in general, there are restoration-related certifications, which are great, and you should get those if you're going to get into the industry, but they're not required. So anybody can do it, which means there's a lot of competition. The other thing, you could be potentially exposed to hazardous material because we're often working around things like, there's a lot of debris involved. We're working around mold. We're working around lead and asbestos and, occasionally communicable diseases and things like that. So there are a lot of hazards present, just like any sort of construction adjacent field. There are a lot of physical hazards as well. So, can be dangerous, can be 24/7, and it can be stressful because typically the homeowners who are calling you, they're calling you because something terrible just happened at their house. No one ever calls a restoration company because they're having a great day, which means most of the customers you're going to be dealing with are going to be really stressed out. So you're not dealing with people at their best. So it can be tough, and it can be challenging, especially with the insurance part. But again, it's sort of a blessing and a curse. It's great that it's paid for by the insurance, so there is the money available, but the downside is that you then have to deal with an insurance company, which can mean jumping through a lot of hoops. The industry tends to attract a lot of carpet cleaners. Carpet cleaners partially because they already have the big commercial truck-mounted extractors or portable extractors to remove water. They often have the commercial air movers to help dry carpets that you would use to help dry houses. So they're already kind of partway there with the equipment, and they tend to often, have pre-established relationships, and they might just tend to get this kind of call anyhow, even if they don't do restoration work, because, well, they already have this relationship with the customers and they know they got the extractor. The other sort of people that tend to get attracted often to the restoration industry, a lot of construction people. Construction people tend to fit really well here, and that's because having a general knowledge of how buildings are put together helps you to dry the building and sometimes, as needed, take it apart. But really, restoration is an industry that is very approachable. Pretty much anybody can get into it. You don't have to have a high school diploma. You don't have to have years of experience necessarily. It's a very accessible industry. My personal favorite thing about the restoration industry is that, like most people, you want to help people, right? You want to help people. You want to be a good human. The restoration industry is an industry where you get to help people, but you get paid for it. And isn't that like the perfect job? You get to help people and you get to get paid well. So there are a lot of pros to the restoration industry. I think they outweigh the cons, but if you're going to get into it, just make sure you're prepared for a lot of stress. You're prepared for the sort of 24/7 hustle of the industry, and you're prepared to kind of deal with some complex situations involving homeowners. So I hope this has been helpful for anybody who's just kind of curious as to what the restoration industry entails in general. Please tune in for our next video, part 2 in our Introduction to Restoration series of videos is going to discuss what to expect from the restoration industry in general. What are some things that you're going to have to encounter and some things you need to know? So tune back in, and as always, check out our website, www.cleanprosupply.com. We've got all of your restoration-related supplies and carpet cleaning supplies as well. Everything from equipment, chemicals, supplies, consumables, parts, extractors, and we've even got vans, and we can finance. So everything you need to get your restoration company up and running and to take it to the next level is on our website. Check it out. All right, guys, that's all for me. I hope business is going well for you, and welcome to the restoration industry. All right, guys, later.